What's going on, guys? This is Rob, and this is our Easter eggs video for Moon Knight. In fact, there's actually two huge Easter eggs in this movie that people are talking about. One, and as far as I can tell, nobody really seems to be talking about the other, which is kind of astounding to me because it basically connects Black Panther to Moon Knight. But a lot of the Easter eggs that are out there are pretty straightforward, right? So like Donna, the woman that Steve Grant works for, is basically modeled after Donna Kraft, who is the publicist of Steve Grant for Steve Corp, which is basically the company that Stephen Grant runs in order to fund his role as Moon Knight. For those of you guys who don't know, when it comes to the three personalities of Mark Spector, there was basically originally just Mark Spector himself, and that was it, right? He was a mercenary and like a soldier of fortune, that kind of a thing. And then after he became Moon Knight, you kind of had two personalities, where you had Mark Spector, then you had Moon Knight. Eventually, Mark developed the identity of Stephen Grant, which originally was not a disassociative identity. Instead, it was just a fake identity that he had fabricated in order to create a legitimate business and then have that business fund his Moon Knight endeavors. Following that, he made another identity called Jake Lockley, which again did not start off as a disassociative identity. Instead, it was just a fake ID that he would use in order to be on the street level and to hear what was going on when it came to crime on the street level. Eventually, because of the fact that he kept intertwining between these different identities, right? Jumping back and forth between pretending to be Steve Grant, pretending to be Jake Lockley, pretending to be Mark Spector, or at least just be Mark Spector, as well as operating as Moon Knight, in addition to like all the crazy endeavors that Khonshu put him through, they all started merging until it got to the point where Mark Spector didn't know which one or which history was actually him, because he gave them all histories. They all had their own histories, their own stories, origins, parents, the whole nine yards, right? Like they had their own identities. And so that's where the disassociative identity kicks in, is because it was basically Mark losing track of his fake IDs and then ultimately absorbing them and then creating actual identities in his mind out of those characters. And so having said that, yeah, the character of Donna is basically the publicist for Stephen Grant in the comics, right? And so it's kind of interesting that that Stephen Grant works for her, because as it stands now in the Moon Knight show, Stephen Grant is not like a millionaire. Like, he's not super rich like he is in the comics. He's just a guy who works at a gift shop. And so we haven't really seen the Jake Lockley persona yet. I don't know if we will. What we do get, at least as far as the ground level element, is we get Bertrand Crawley. That was basically the guy who was in the golden statue, or who was pretending to be a golden statue. That's the guy that feeds information to Mark Spector or Moon Knight or Mr. Knight or whatever identity he's using, in order to kind of go forward and maintain his role as a superhero or a vigilante, and then deal with different criminal elements that he otherwise wouldn't have known about had it not been for the information of Crawley. Now, the other cool thing here is that because of the fact that the two of them basically talk, it looks like it's more than a conversation of like them just talking, or like him just talking to this guy who is a golden statue. Like, he literally brings him a burrito and he was like, here's the same burrito as always. So essentially, or maybe a wrap, I don't know. He brought him food, right? And it seemed to be his favorite food. So seemingly the two of them have had conversations in the past, even if it was just because of the fact that, you know, Crawley was getting ready for his gig where he goes out there and entertains the masses or whatever it is. But it looks like the involvement between the two stretches beyond simply just Stephen Grant talking to a guy who pretends to be a statue in a park, right? I mean, given this dude's life, it sounds like something he would do. But it sounds like there's a little more to it than that. There's also a few other Easter eggs where like Steve Grant missed the bus, and so like he's racing to catch it, and on one of the buildings it says Atlantis, so people are taking that as like a nod to Name of the Submariner. But what's really, really cool when it comes to these Easter eggs, what's really, really important here is, one, Latveria and Black Panther. Now, here's the reason why I say this. When we're first introduced to Arthur Harrow, and I'm not talking about like the opening scene when he puts glass in his shoes, which is actually a nod to the fact that in the comics, Arthur Harrow was a guy who was obsessed with pain. It was crazy, man. So like, here's the thing. When Arthur Harrow is first introduced, one of the craziest stories, when Arthur Harrow is first introduced, Moon Knight basically ends up on this island where like these experiments are being conducted on people. And he's like investigating and trying to understand what's going on, because there's like a person who escapes. I want to say he's on vacation, and then while he's on vacation, he's like there's just some person running through, like, you know, being rounded up or whatever it is, and he's like, okay, we got to investigate this. This guy, Arthur Harrow, he basically suffered from a degenerative illness where he felt pain all the time, and so the idea was twofold. One, to basically cure his own illness insofar as finding a way to basically block the neurotransmitters for pain, and two, it could actually be weaponized and used by like corporations to kind of create super soldiers, right? Kind of, again, this ongoing theme that always happened in Marvel Marvel Comics that following the death of Captain America, that there was this mad dash by like scientists and like the government and Weapons Plus, all that kind of stuff, to find a way to create super soldiers, right? That's why I say, like, with Captain America, that Pandora's box was opened, right? Like, as soon as it was literally like Steve Rogers getting the super soldier serum, becoming a super soldier, everybody wanted to make their own variation of it. But regardless, the scene that I'm referencing with regards to the introduction of Arthur Harrow is like when you actually see him basically judging people because of what Amit wants, right? Judging their hearts to see what they have done, what they're currently doing, or what they will do, and whether or not it's evil, and then of course killing them based on what's going to happen. That whole sequence, right? Like literally that sequence from that point, running to the point when Mark has the cupcake truck and disappoints us all by not eating one, and like all those things, right? Like all that takes place in Latveria. That's the on-running theory, and I think that's true, because I feel like if it wasn't Latveria and just some random town, they probably would have given it a name. They probably would have been like, this is the town he's in, right? Even if it was just like some words up in the top right or top left-hand corner of the screen, it would have told us where he was at. Now, the more obvious question here that a lot of non-comic book readers would probably ask is, if that's Latveria, which is where Dr. Doom resides, and he's in that giant castle that you saw off in the distance, why didn't he do anything to stop all this madness that was going on in his town where there's like a shootout and people are dying and different things like that? Well, there's a couple reasons why. The first is because, one, Dr. Doom is notoriously reclusive. Like you hear about stories where like he goes out and he fights the Fantastic Four or something along those lines, but unless he's involved in some kind of a campaign that could potentially be a threat to Latveria or could boost his own power, he doesn't care. He never leaves Castle Doomstadt, right? Even his son, Christoph Bernard, never leaves Castle Doomstadt. Like, they never go out into the general public. And the reason why is because Dr. Doom kind of sees himself as being above the people, but at the same time exists to protect the people. Again, this was really highlighted in Jonathan Hickman's Avengers, New Avengers. This was really highlighted in that story when he was talking to Namor the Submariner. And he was talking about how, like if the people in Latveria really wanted to destroy him, does Dr. Doom think that they wouldn't do it? And Dr. Doom's like, no, they could kill me if they wanted to, right? Like, I would not kill my own people. He's like, I would die before I let my people die. He's like, but I keep them protected, I keep them safe, I keep them fed, right? I keep them watered, I make their life better, right? I give them a life and a home here. And so he's like, before they give thanks to whatever God they believe in when they go to bed at night, they give thanks to me, right? I mean, it's the most arrogant statement ever, but that's how Dr. Doom sees himself in relation to his people. He's like a parent, right? Kind of like this guiding force, but he doesn't get himself involved in every single skirmish, because by and large, the people of Latveria are very tough and hardened people. They'll keep themselves protected. So if this Arthur Harrow guy has like 20 people surrounding him and they see him as somebody who is believable or somebody that has like this kind of almost mystical nature about him, make no mistake, they do not worship him. They worship Dr. Doom. This is just a guy they're very intrigued with at the moment. But if you were, for example, to say that like that begins to grow and like it turns into this thing where the people love Arthur Harrow so much they actually start to lose faith in Dr. Doom and focus on Arthur Harrow, Dr. Doom would likely step in. Either that or it would turn into like some kind of religious civil war between the people who are faithful to Dr. Doom and the people who are not faithful to Dr. Doom. And then, of course, Dr. Doom would step in and probably kill off Arthur Harrow, right? Just whisk him away and just be like, do not forget who keeps you fed, right? Do not forget who takes care of you. And then, like, go back to Castle Doom. Because that's the thing. Like, 9 times out of 10, whenever you see Dr. Doom in Marvel Comics, it's usually a Doombot, right? One of the robots he's made that looks exactly like him. And the robots are designed to actually believe they are him so that no one can tell the difference between a Doombot and the actual Victor Von Doom. So that's probably why he wouldn't necessarily have gotten involved there. But that location, that whole area looks exactly like Latveria. Like, it looks exactly like Latveria in the comics. We'll put a panel up here, right? We will put, if we haven't already, we will put a comic book depiction of Latveria up here and tell me it doesn't look the same. Right? Like, tell me it does not look like that. A giant castle off in the distance, a little village, or kind of a bigger village, right? A little kingdom area where, you know, it looks exactly like it does in the show, right? So that looks like Latveria. I'm pretty sure it is. And if it is, it's a very smart move not to invoke its name, and it's a very smart move not to have, like, pictures of Dr. Doom all over the place, so, like, you know that he's there. It's just one of those small little teasers. It gets people talking. But as far as the other big Easter egg here goes, right? Let's talk about Khonshu for a second and his connection to the Panther god Bast. So Khonshu and Bast and a lot of those others are what we call new gods in Marvel Comics. At least not everybody, I do, right? I mean, technically I call them new gods, and then you have the elder gods. So the way this worked, we're going to kind of take a page out of the comic books here and focus on the comics in this instance. And of course, we also covered this in our video explaining the history of Khonshu in Marvel Comics over at Comics Explained if you guys are interested in seeing that. But the way this worked is that what you had, at least one of the explanations in terms of how life originated on Earth, is you had a being that was referred to as the Demiurge. Now, the Demiurge was basically the sentient manifestation of the Earth's biosphere, right? Basically, life itself on Earth. And that what it did is it went through and basically created the elder gods, as well as planting the seeds of what would eventually become like humans and animals and different things along those lines. Now, these elder gods were wide and varying. You guys have already heard of some of them. So people like Chthon, right? He's an example of it. But where the elder gods were simply just created by the Demiurge, over time, they basically went nuts. And they ended up just becoming like these really evil, twisted versions of themselves. So much so that they were basically tormenting life on Earth and then fighting each other, vying for power. And so what ended up happening is the only member of the elder gods who was not corrupted was Gaia, basically the sentience of Mother Earth, as well as the biological mother of Thor. And so what ended up going on is that she went to the Demiurge and asked the Demiurge to give her the ability to give birth to a being powerful enough to defeat the elder gods and allow life on Earth to flourish. This basically meant that the Demiurge impregnated her with a being named Atum. Atum eventually became the Demigorge, and literally Atum went through and killed virtually every single one of the elder gods. The only ones that didn't die were the ones who fled. So you're talking about basically the Octessants, right? So like Sidorak and those guys. And then you talk about people like Chthon and so on and so forth. They all basically bailed. And so the result of this is that now they all exist in their own individual dimensions, and that once Atum had destroyed them all, Atum took off, went into the sun, and then became the first in an age of new gods, calling himself Amun-Ra, right? This the Egyptian sun god. And so what this did is it led to Atum basically giving birth to all kinds of like a new generation of gods. Marvel never really specifies if like the Norse pantheon of gods are tied into Atum, and in fact, there's no reason to believe they are. Their history actually seems to predate the idea of Atum in the sense that like they've been part of the cycle of Ragnarok, the birth and death of Asgard, like over and over and over again, right? The idea of Atum, insofar as this age of new gods, seems largely confined to the Ennead, basically the pantheon of Egyptian gods. And so what this does is it leads into, well, really, it brings in Atum as something that's referred to as the Sky Fathers. So Atum is basically a member of the Council of Godhead. So like Atum, Zeus, Odin, Vishnu, like all those different quote-unquote heads of like the godly pantheons that exist from different cultures around the world. Atum is a part of those. But the thing about this is that among these various Egyptian gods, you got Khonshu and you got Bast. Bast originally started out as an Egyptian god, but when the first member of Wakanda, the first person in Wakanda, Bashinga, I think it was, basically encountered the vibranium meteorite and then prayed to basically find protection for it, that led to Bast actually defecting from the Egyptian pantheon of gods and then traveling to Wakanda and becoming what was in effect the patron saint of the Wakandan Panther clan. Basically, the Panther clan derives all their power from Bast. And so that's how Bast ended up becoming the Panther god of Wakanda. But she is the offspring of Atum, or Amun-Ra, and so is Khonshu. And so as a result of that, they are in effect family. They're connected, right? Brothers. It's kind of weird. Like, Bast is depicted to us as both a male and a female. It changes based on who's telling the story. More often than not, Bast appears as basically just like a giant panther. But if you go and you read like Jonathan Hickman's Fantastic Four, or any of the stories written by Jonathan Hickman, Black Panther T'Challa always refers to Bast as goddess. And in fact, there is a point in Hickman's Fantastic Four when basically T'Challa goes on to become the king of the dead after having to give up the Black Panther mantle to Shuri, that he ends up basically meeting with Bast, who is in a humanoid form and looks like a woman, right? Like Bast has female features. Whereas if you look in other comics over the years of Marvel Comics, Bast has just been referred to as God, right? The god of the Panther clan. So again, it's kind of nebulous in terms of whether or not Bast is like male or female. And in the end, it doesn't really matter, right? I mean, it's just it's a powerful being who exists out there. But nonetheless, I thought it was kind of cool, right? That's something really, really cool. Whether or not we'll see any connection between Bast and Khonshu in the Moon Knight show has yet to be seen. I imagine we'll probably get some kind of a segment in the show that will give us like this lineage of, kind of like this long form discussion of like the different Egyptian gods that are out there. And if ever we were going to see a connection between Khonshu and Bast, that's when we would get it. And I think they will. I think they'll be like, from Amun-Ra came this new age of gods and goddesses. Among them was Khonshu and Bast. And people are gonna be like, Bast? From like Wakanda? And it's like, yes. I'm really excited to see what direction this goes in. But with that being said, guys, we're gonna bring this video to an end. Thank you all for watching, and I will catch you all later. Peace.